Hello and welcome to a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and welcome back to a brand new episode. This week, I'm talking about how a career break can change your life, and in this case, for the better. So, career breaks can be defined as just a small to a large period of time where you take off from either your full-time job, like the job that earns you the money, the big bucks, all of these things to be able to go out and pursue things that may be just meaningful to you. The Oxford Dictionary definition may be much different to what I've said there, but to me, a career break is literally taking the time to figure out what you want to do in life. And I think that's as simple as it gets from there. Taking the time to understand where you are, what you want to do, and where you're going from here. The pros and cons of the whole period of time are actually so specific to the person because you may find that you have a very different career break to somebody else. For instance, some people may have finances to be able to back them throughout that period of time, but others may not and may only have a short period of time to be able to work within their means and be able to take that break away from their career. In my case, I was lucky enough to be able to take 10 months off and be able to travel for a lot of that period of time and to be able to focus on what I really wanted out of life and understand where I'm going, what my strengths are, and how I can better myself throughout that period of time. One thing that I have definitely found is that when I'm focused on something I truly enjoy, it feels effortless. It feels fun to do, and I really don't feel that I should be focusing on something that's making me feel drained and low energy. One thing that I did figure out was that after I finished my previous programming job, that I didn't actually want to do programming anymore. And that not only in my mind, I wasn't good enough to do it, and that probably isn't true because I've done multiple programming jobs successfully, but for me personally, I felt that I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I wasn't enjoying the process. I didn't enjoy some of the smaller details. You know, something gets bad when you just stop caring, when you stop caring about the smaller things within the job and you start realizing that you'd much rather be doing something else and focusing on a different aspect of the industry. Lucky enough, that 10 months period has made me realize that. It's also something that you don't want to say to yourself that maybe the path you chose was the wrong one. And the only way you can do that is by making a change and doing something different in your life. And that may feel very daunting. And it may make you feel that the world's ending to some extent. And when the pandemic happened and the Russian war happened and all these things are happening, it can make you feel that there's almost an existential crisis happening in your life. And that's not the case at all. You just need to reflect upon your own personal experience and figure out where you want to go from here. I think that's the best thing about taking career break is that you can actually figure out where you want to go. It may take the entire 10 months to be able to figure out what your next steps are, but you have that time to be able to do so. For me personally, I find myself chopping and changing on what I want to do on a regular basis. When I say a regular basis, I feel like 5-year periods are a good way to judge how you've looked at your career. And at the end of each 5-year period, you should probably figure out what the next steps are to be able to, make you happy within the next 5-year period rather than looking back on the previous one and saying, maybe that wasn't the right move. And you can evaluate and really figure that out. I've been doing the 5-year periods of what I want to accomplish within that 5-year period. And that really helps me understand not success necessarily, but what I personally enjoyed doing. One of my favorite things over the past 10 years has been how I've progressed in my running, how I've progressed physically, the mental challenges that have come along, the fact that I've been able to turn a lot of my weaknesses into strengths. I've realized that I'm highly goal orientated person, somebody who likes to have action rather than theory. And so everything that I will do, I will repeatedly do over and over again until I get it to a point that I'm satisfied with. And even when I'm satisfied with it, I know the end result is never as good as the actual journey itself. One of my favorite things that most recently, while I was in Barcelona, that I just come back from and I took a break from the podcast for, was that I was enjoying the walk more than the end destination. So I was listening to my music, I was walking through the streets of Barcelona and wherever I was going. For instance, one of the places that I was meant to be going was to a gondola, where I was going to go to the top of Barcelona, to a high point, a viewpoint from the top, and I was going to get a gondola to get to a certain vantage point and take photos from there. But what actually happened is I walked there, and I loved the journey. I loved going past the harbour and going through the city streets and listening to my music and really enjoying the vibes. By the time I got there, I saw a big queue at the gondola and thought, well, I'm not really that intrigued into it. And you realize you've actually enjoyed the process more than the actual end goal. And what I ended up doing was having an ice cream and having a fizzy drink and looking over the view that I had in front of me and taking photos of that instead and just enjoying that moment. And I think sometimes it may not be what you predicted, but you're still happy from that result. And this is something that having the time to go from a career which you're thinking you must be making progress every single year. Every year you'll be making the next step, the next piece of your career will be within the next job, and you've got to be constantly moving forward. And you may feel this erratic and you're going in that direction. And for me, it was very difficult to say to myself, right, I'm going to quit from a job. I'm not a quitter. I don't like it. It makes me feel weak. And that is something that's truly important to understand, and that you need to rectify that in your mind. And that was something, sorry, I should say I needed to rectify that in my mind. That's definitely it. I needed to understand that I wasn't weak by taking the time off, and that it was going to strengthen me, and that I was going to be able to understand some more of my weaknesses and turn them into strengths. One of my favorite things was understanding that maybe I wasn't going down the right career path, and that I should be playing to some of my strengths, such as my communication skills and my ability to work with clients and problem solving within that, rather than just focusing purely on looking at a computer 8 hours of the day, every day, and not utilizing the other side of myself. And I'm really looking forward to the next step. By taking those 10 months off, I've actually realized, like, oh, I'm gonna go into a more client-based role, and I'm going to utilize the strengths that I have, and I'm gonna build upon my problem solving, and I'm not gonna focus on just solely trying to do a job that may not fit me. And as much as I am a big fan of building upon weaknesses and creating strengths from weaknesses, sometimes the role may not be right for you. And then that may sound like a little bit of hypocrisy, but it's life. We are hypocrites to some extent. You do build upon your person. If you stay in the same viewpoint as you were years ago, from when you were a kid to being an adult, or from an adult to a middle-aged person, then you haven't evolved as a person, and that can be quite a negative thing for you, especially as we are in times that continuously evolve and that the technology continuously changes, that we have to evolve with it. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that I'm really excited for the next step after my career break. I'm going back into the industry. I'm going back into a completely different role. I'm getting paid even more, which is always fun to say. I love saying that. I can't believe it. One of my fears was that actually I was going to stagnate. Instead, I'm not stagnating. So I'm making even more progress than I was previously making. And from there, it's an exciting turning point in my career, which is crazy to say at 27, that the money I will be making is more than I've ever made before in my life. And this is madness to be saying at my age, and to have taken, a lollygagging 10-month break, fun times alert, to then going into being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make more money now. It's mind-blowing to me. It's mind-blowing. And now that I move into a new period of my life, I'll go with you on the next steps of how you can also do the same thing in some ways. I don't think it's going to be contextually seriously applicable, but what I can say to you is this, and it may sound like kind of mumbo jumbo in the sense that it's not seriously practical, but be patient. That would be my main thing to say, is be patient. Don't just lurch at the first opportunity that comes your way in terms of moving into the next step in your career. Don't take that lap at that first job. Don't be persuaded by external factors around you. Utilize the time to realize, like, okay, right, I know I don't have this now, but I really want to move in a direction that's really going to make me happy. And even though there may be certain things around you saying you need to do this, you need to do that, I want you to be patient. Try to control those voices of other people, or the voices in your head where they're saying, oh yeah, I better do what they're saying, I better, start up real fast and find this next position. Don't. Be calm. Allow yourself to understand that everything comes in time, and that sometimes, like I've found actually recently, is that loads of positive things happen all at once. You get like a drought of absolutely nothing, actually a lot of negativity, and then you get a surge of positivity all of a sudden. And it actually feels like the world's come together and bit like, here you go, here's your reward. And that can feel really, really positive. One of the negatives that I've kind of semi-underlined there is that you are playing with a limited amount of time. And I think actually the time is more valuable than the money that may be running out as well. That's another con I'll get onto in a minute. It's just that you have a limited amount of time with your career break, because we can't all just, we can't retire in our mid-20s or mid-30s or wherever you're at. And I think that it can almost feel very high pressure. And that's why I bring up the being calm situation, is that you have the opportunity to seem a very, a conscious level of understanding that the next step you take really will affect you, your happiness and who you are, and you being content, and you being not taking a step that you're going to regret. I talk about on the podcast is that one of my biggest goals in life is that by the end of it, I will have minimal to no regrets. I want to make decisions that are going to make my future self proud and my current self happy. And for the future me, the future Chris Taylor, to look back and say, I was so pleased I made that decision. This is one of the best decisions of my life, by the way, taking this 10-month period off. It's changed who I am. I am in the best shape of my life. I am constantly learning new things. I've learned to journal, meditate. I was meditating before, but enhancing it to a little bit. I feel like I know exactly who I am and what I want to do, and how I'm very different to other people, and how I look at things, and how I may have very different opinions to other people, but that's okay, because that's what makes life really interesting. And that you don't have to satisfy everybody, and you don't have to please everybody, and you don't have to make everybody around you into your bubble. One of my favorite things to see at the moment is actually how the world's trying to divide everybody. But when you get out there and you meet people, actually, we're more closer together than ever. When you meet new people, when you meet people along the similar paths you're going down, you're going to realize how similar people are to you, and that they're not that different, and that people are wonderful. And there are some dicks out there, but they are, like I said, like the science backs this. There is only 1% of people who are psychopaths and sociopaths. That is a tiny percentage. Now, there's a massive population, so 1% of 7 billion is still quite a lot of people. However, you've still got to think that actually the majority of people are out there trying to do good. They're not trying to go out of their way to emotionally scar you for life or physically hurt you or all of these things. I do believe that human beings are good. I've been out in the world. I'm not naive. I've seen the world. I've seen I've seen shit in the streets. I've seen people, hungry. I've seen these things, and yet I still believe in the good, even though I've seen the evil. Do you know? It's this understanding that, yes, I am a very privileged person living in a privileged society, and I accept that even more so because I've seen the darkness. And by doing so, by putting yourself in tough conditions, I heard this recently. We live in a society now where we live in such good conditions that we simulate terror and awfulness within our lives. We put ourselves in horrible situations such as cold plunges, saunas, massive runs in the heat, Tough Mudders, all of these things to simulate evil and to simulate hard times because we live in such good times. And it makes me laugh a little bit because over the past 10 months, I train quite difficult. I've talked about this a lot of time. A lot of my training is I train every single day. There is no rest. There is no end to it. And so for me to personally say that I have to simulate pain and suffering to get into that mindset, it doesn't feel real to me. I feel like I can just switch it on at any point. And for me personally, I do understand that that theory. I think it is spot on, to be fair, for everybody, that we do live in such good times that we do have to simulate the negativity. But getting back to the original point of this podcast is that 10 months, what can you do? What can you achieve? Well, one of my favorite things is actually the knowledge and going and researching stuff that you didn't have the time to do so beforehand. One of my favorite things that's happened over the past year is that my French has improved. I feel much more confident with my speaking of French. I've also realized my lack of foundations in terms of Spanish. One of my favorite stories I tell people of how little Spanish I know is when I was in Mexico with some friends going out for a meal at a restaurant. I pointed to an item on the menu and said, uno. And literally that was it. Just went uno, and my friends laughed because of the lack. Not I think because I was super tired at the time. My brain just wasn't functioning. But sometimes I just do stuff, and my close friends will know this, where I do stuff and I don't mean to be funny, but I definitely am, like, unintentionally stupid. And I think that can really make a fantastic situation for you to have some self-reflection on how dumb you can be, but also at the same time it's also great to look back and think, I can turn that weakness into a strength. So I am starting recently getting back into doing Spanish, and I'm going to be practicing that, and I'm going to try my best to utilize that when I visit Spain from now on. Because when I went to Barcelona, I was like, oh God, my lack of Spanish is really bad. And there's so many lovely people who speak English in these countries, but I don't want to be relying purely on my foundational language, my born with language. I feel the need to be able to communicate with the locals and establish a rapport, and not be that dick who comes abroad and expects everyone else to speak his language. I hate it. I hate myself when I go, hablas inglés, señor? And you're like, oh God, this guy, really? Like that's what's going in my head before I go anywhere and have to say that sentence. And I imagine that's not the case for a lot of Spanish and French speakers. My goal one day is actually to do one of these podcasts in French and Spanish, and I think that would be really bring more of a community to this podcast as well, bringing different speakers and not relying purely on those who speak English, which is obviously the majority of these listeners. So knowledge. One of the other things that I've realized is, like, I want to be able to, because there's a recession currently, 2 quarters of negative growth, I also want to focus on being able to understand financial terms and jargon that's out there. So I'm going out of my way to do some research. As you have seen, and I've spoken about on this podcast a lot of times, is that I'm reading a lot of books. Getting my reading up. I think the average was like 12 books a year previously. I think I've doubled that to like 24 books a year at the moment, which for me is really good. I'm a really slow reader, but it's increasing my knowledge. A lot of them are self-help books, and I think for me that's helpful because I'm building a mental strength that means that people can come at me with lots of negativity and I can still just wash it away and know exactly where I'm going in my life. I think this is the fun thing for me to do these little projects, is that I can chop and change, and maybe people don't like it, maybe they do, but have the mental strength and the mental ability to steel myself and say, nope, keep going, doesn't matter. Just change a few things, experiment, and keep moving forward. Don't stagnate. Don't stop. Keep moving forward. And I think with this period of time to take off, you can experiment so much with the things that you want to learn, the things that you've always wanted to try, the places you've always wanted to visit. For me personally, I think one of the only things that I'm a little bit sad about was not being able to get over to Australia and New Zealand. They've only just, like, New Zealand literally just opened up about, I think it was less than half a month ago. And which to me is mind-boggling. And I will be visiting New Zealand hopefully sometime next year for a couple of weeks. But I think what really annoyed me was that Australia was meant to go in January, and they didn't open up until like March or April. And I was like, by the time that had happened, I didn't really want to financially commit to a massive flight from the UK and then also have to do all the, I think it was like tests that they were still doing to get into other countries, which was a pain in the butt. A PCR test, I think, at the same time. But enough negativity on that. I have been able to utilize that time. My question would be, have I utilized it to the maximum? I think that for about 9 of the 10 months, yes. Most recently, the past month, I've just been a little bit chilling because of the acquiring a job, and then also acquiring knowing that I've got some financial stability coming up, and then also acquiring an apartment. I've taken some time off to relax and recuperate a little bit, because from even though I was traveling, even though I was you know not working, I was also focusing on skilling myself up, preparing myself for the next role by doing programming and by doing UML design, and looking into the software development side of things for me personally, and making sure that I was staying on top of that. And I think that's also something that you can't let go. I think that's a con, actually, in terms of the 10 months or 12 months or 3 months or 6 months, however, or 9 months you're taking off. You will have to stay up to date with the current technology, or whatever you're working in, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer. You have to stay up with the current metadata of your profession, and by doing so, that does take time out of your day. That does take you having to make sure that you are up to date on the newest and current stuff that's happening within your field. And that may feel like a little bit of a chore to do so, but that also will mean, am I still interested in this field? Am I still interested in doing these things? And if it feels like a chore, and it feels kind of, I think, a little bit of a drain on you, then that may be the sign for you to move into a new area or try a new thing. And that may be scary, but it also may help you into a new state of life. And I can tell you right now, I'm seriously excited for that new state for myself, and for you, the listener. One of the things that I think a lot of people forget is that, let's say you're taking 12 months to build a business, for instance. Well, 99% of businesses fail within the first year. And so you have to be really mentally strong to be able to understand that, the project that you're going to be working on, or the products you're going to be creating, or the new business that you're starting up, it may not just immediately click and fly off the handles. Lucky you if it has, in which case, congratulations, clap, clap, clap in your general direction. But what I will say is this, is that just because you've failed once, I think one of the greatest things in life is that you have the opportunity to fail over and over and over and over and over again, to be able to learn from it and to be able to progress. One of the things that we are taught very early on is that failure is bad. And I think that's actually quite wrong. I think failure is a good way to understand what success is. And by doing so, if I didn't run every weekend, I wouldn't have a good idea of what an actual good run is. You understand that you can't have light without darkness. So you have to have lots of losing to be able to understand how good winning is. Big up Mr. Kobe for making me realize that in the corner there, as well as Michael Jordan and a lot of the other winning athletes' mindsets that say that losing allows you to be a better winner. So I think that's another thing, is if you have a business and it doesn't immediately take off within that first year, or you don't immediately get that success you're looking for, don't stop, continue to fail. And I promise you, if you have that willingness to succeed, you'll join me along the way towards it as well. And I think this is the beginning for a lot of people who are willing to put themselves out there, to really sacrifice. This is where you're going to win. From the age of your late 20s to your late 30s, this is where we find out who's going to be the big bucks, who's going to be the millennials, who are the winners. I genuinely believe over the next 10 years we're going to see who's going to make it and who's not. And I think it's going to be a fascinating time to be able to see who can utilize time the best, and who's going to be able to make the most out of that time and be super successful from it. I think that's another thing. You are going to want to understand what motivates you, what gets you up in the morning. If you're someone like me, I'm an early riser. I love getting up early in the morning and really getting after the day. One of the things that I heard recently is, actually, I'm going to try it soon, is that instead of having an alarm clock, have a light that turns on at the time that you want to get up instead, and be woken up by light. I thought that was a really cool concept. Being woken up naturally by light makes a lot more sense than being woken up by alarm, which can make you disorientated and obviously make you feel pretty hazy. So I'm going to give that a try. There's, again, with the time that you have off, you can utilize it to understand, little things like this, little ideas that you can implement within your life. And even if you're working right now, you can understand that you can utilize the time before and after work to be able to figure out what you're going to do. This is something that I've learned during the 10 months off as well, is what schedule can I use to be at my best, and what can I do to make myself happy and understand that I'm being productive, and not just feeling like I'm doing a lot and doing nothing at the same time. And that can be a little bit of a demotivator when you feel like you're putting so much time in and not getting a lot out. It is to be able to get results, but also get positive results rather than just results for the sake of them. I don't know, that might not make sense, but to me, it's the idea of using time efficiently rather than just using time for the sake of using time, and saying you've done stuff within it rather than having actually useful stuff. I've totally understand where I've put a load of time into something and then realized like, oh, it's not that useful. And sometimes you have to just bin it and move on. And that sucks, because you have to look at yourself and your ego and just be like, well, looks like I fucked up there. And then you have to be right, time to start over, move on, get it done. And that can be a tough place to be mentally, because you feel that you really put some effort in and yet there isn't a result from it. So there's that as well. Like I said earlier, I'm going to cover this now as well. The finance behind taking time off. You are going to have finances to back yourself up over that period of time. You can't rely on other people. The con of this, taking this time off, is that you will have to have finances. I was lucky enough to be able to save up during the pandemic, and so I had around £20,000 to be able to back me throughout the year. That's only just, I think I'm down to 5,000. So I've spent like 15 over the past 10 months. And that has been mainly due to saving and being efficient with my money. I tried, I think I got into 6 months in, and I had to start selling a few assets, which really pissed me off because I really didn't want to have to do that. And so that made me go into that not panic mode, but where you really want to, you get a job, but it's a job out of necessity rather than out of want. And I realized, like, okay, it's better to sell some of these assets rather than choose a job that you're going to be doing, that you're going to do just so that you don't sell the assets. And I think that's also something that you need to take into account as well, is that in Rich Dad Poor Dad, I talked about in this previous podcast, is that they talk about that you shouldn't sell assets and instead take on debt. But sometimes if it's debt that I'm talking about, it's not positive debt, it's negative debt, it's liability debt, in which case it kind of counteracts itself in that sense. But anyway, that's off topic. Finances. Have your finances in order. Have enough to be able to get through the period of time that you're going to take off, and feel comfortable within that time. That would be my advice, is have finances that are going to make you feel comfortable, and know that your style of life is going to match that. If you're somebody who likes luxury hotels, you're probably going to need a lot more than I had for that period of time. If you're somebody who's okay doing hostels for the majority of the time, like me, then you will have to get a certain amount. But what I will say to you is that if you're in your late 20s, like myself as well, you may not like hostels as much as you think you do, because some of them are great, some of them aren't so great. And so maybe have some money in reserve to be able to go to a hotel every now and then, to be able to spice life up a little bit and give yourself a little bit of a treat. That's something that I've noticed across multiple articles that I've read when people travel, is that we always overestimate how much we can take in terms of living in a certain style of life, and that we don't really treat ourselves in terms of certain things. I think it was Jordan Peterson who said, buy yourself the damn coffee and treat yourself once you've done something that makes improve your life. So if you wash the dishes, go get the coffee that you want from the store. And it's the same in this style, is that save enough money so that you can once in a while treat yourself, so that you don't feel like it's a chore doing a lot of these things. And I'm not saying that if you're someone like me who also understands that you have to be a tough person in life, it doesn't mean don't do the tough things. It just means that have that reserve to know that you can treat yourself from time to time, and you have the ability to do so, because living within a limit where you're constantly thinking about money is going to stress you out, and it's going to put you in a negative position. And you don't want to be that. You want to have this time off, and you want to reflect back on it like I am, and saying it's one of the best times of your life, and then you're going to look back on it and think to yourself, damn, that was friggin' awesome. One of the other things that I want to address as well is that you also have to have a family and friends group who are going to appreciate you taking time off. It's going to affect them. It's going to affect them seeing you and being around them and all of these things. And you're going to have all these positive messages of traveling and all these things. And they may not want to hear that because they're living their normal lives. So you've also got to be aware that sometimes that the things you're doing may be very different to a lot of other people around you. And they may be positive and they may be negative. But you are going to be enhancing your life. You're going to be building your bubble. And I've talked about this multiple times on the podcast before. We all live in our little tunnel vision worlds, but we can expand them by doing more and by traveling and meeting new people and talking to new people. One of the things recently is that I have to be in the right mindset to be able to meet new people. I have to be in this extroverted mindset. Don't be afraid to be introverted sometimes as well as extroverted, and not just think you're one or the other. Take time sometimes to not talk to people for a week, and then sometimes you can talk to and expand that bubble. It's okay. This is the time for you to figure out what you do and how you work. One of my things that I've figured out about myself is that I can do long stretches of time on my own without talking to anybody. And I can be very content, very happy. And then when I see people, I'm like, oh, people, woo, and if you've made it this far on the podcast, you'll also understand that we chop and change. We are hypocrites and human beings. We change. Like I said earlier, we evolve. And so it's okay to not just be one thing. You can be multiple things and you can enjoy that. And it will be a contradiction sometimes, but it will also make you very happy because you are accepting who you are and moving into life, into forward. And so you can be extroverted, introverted, whatever you want to be, and figure it. It's not going to affect anyone else in terms of how you are. But you're going to understand how you operate and how that can affect people in a positive way. So you can be more positive because of how you allow yourself to have time on your own. Allow yourself to go speak to new people and do new things, but at the same time, not overwhelm yourself. And this isn't advice, by the way. This is just me ranting on a little bit in terms of what I feel and what I've gone through and how that experience happens. I think Cameron Hanes said it best in his book Endure, is that I don't give out advice because people can manipulate that advice and change it. And he talks about how it can affect people in a negative way. And that by giving advice, you become one of those guys who are on stage doing those talks that I'm not too keen on either, and neither is he. So let's leave it here on this positive note, is that taking time off and getting away from your career and taking time for yourself, you're going to figure out who you are. You're going to figure out what makes you happy, what makes you tick, how you want to manage your time, and where you want to be in the future. And that's such a strong move for you. Don't look at it as a negative in taking time off for yourself. It's for you. You're going to become a better person by doing so. So let's become monsters together. Let's move forward and let's build upon our foundations. And I think that's the best way to look at a career break and how it can change your life. So this has been the Taylor's Tales podcast. This has been Chris's Corner. I've been your host, Chris Taylor. And as always, I hope to see you this time next week. Bye now.